where is Ukraine?
You're here.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Policy affects change at the cross-section of political power. Fire and fury, folks.
Chaos. It's gonna be a fun day.
Welcome back to
Buckle up, baby.
episode 19. Did the
19.
chair just fart, or you just moved it in a weird way?
I think I was drumming.
Episode 19.
Live from Kiev.
Us and most people are so ill-informed.
So ill-informed.
Like you have to be
Yeah.
you have to be somebody who actually reads the stuff
Yeah.
and follows international relations to know anything about
Yeah.
the subject of Russia, China.
I go to Ukraine once a year, and I'm still pretty ill-informed.
Because that's like a Jewish angle. In other words, when it comes to world affairs,
Mm-hmm.
it's like Israel, Palestine. That conversation is something we're at least experienced in having. Whether we know all the facts on the ground, we have family in these parts of the world, and we have this conversation all the time. Once somebody says, the thing with Russia and China, we start going,
right.
yeah. But the only way we can speak about the subject is from a pure ignorant stance of just what I've observed. The information I've observed is that
Well, just quick. We're recording this on Thursday, February 23rd. The war broke out. Russia invaded last night.
right.
So by the time you hear this, it might be different, but that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, so what? You think it could get a lot worse and then we sound real callous and disgusting.
Yeah, like if New York doesn't exist in a week.
Right,
and we're
right,
like,
right. No, God
live from
forbid.
Kiev.
But I hear, so what's interesting is I just have these recollections when it comes to these headlines of a couple of things that are interesting. One, Romney was laughed at in his debate when they asked him in 2012, who do you think is our most formidable and dangerous geopolitical foe? And he said Russia. And everyone laughed at him.
Yeah.
So the poor guy was just really a product of bad timing in terms of some of his ideas. Because at the time that was like a laughable thing. And everyone's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then since then, like 2 years later, 4 years later, Russia invades Crimea during Obama's presidency, whatever the hell Crimea is. I thought it was like a flavor of donut. Crimea flavor is delicious.
Yeah. It's like it's a seasonal
It's
flavor.
Crimea River. That was the theme when it happened. Crimea River. That's terrible. We are just. I really hope it's going to get worse there in
It's
Ukraine
gonna
as
get
we make all
worse.
these
It's gonna
jokes
get
at their
worse,
expense.
yeah.
But we're just trying to console ourselves because things feel very
Well, what
weird.
else are you going to do?
No, nothing. You're right.
We don't understand it and we don't know what's happening.
But that happened on Obama's watch.
Yeah.
And then I was having a conversation with friends where, I never like to be that guy that just tries to make these random correlations. Or maybe I like to be that guy, but I know I'm being that guy where it's like, well, during Trump's time, you can't say during Trump. It didn't try. But you can't help but observe, just observably, Obama, Trump, Biden.
Yeah.
And in Obama, you have these, I think, forms of leadership where there's a psychological element to it where whether or not the policies are going to be different, it's what kind of image do you project that deters adversaries?
Right.
And I feel like in Obama's case, where he's the leading from behind and apology tour and that whole thing that America's flawed and we need to do better. We need to do better and gather the world together and appealing to the UN and doing all that stuff. That results in one way of leaders on the international stage behaving, adversaries of the United States behaving, testing and pushing. And I think that did happen a few times on Obama's watch. I think Syria, remember that red line story where they bombed, they used chemical weapons and he drew a red line but never did anything about it. And Yemen and all this international, chaos and Crimea. And then Trump, I don't know policy-wise what the differences were technically, but ain't nothing to fuck with. You say what you want about him. He did project this idea of, don't fuck with me. Yeah. Fire and fury, folks. And these leaders, whether it's because he's unpredictable or whether they know that he would be actually put his money where his mouth is when it came to doing things that were politically unpopular. Yeah. I think that is really the difference, that Trump is sort of, I don't give a shit about the polls, folks. I don't care about the polls.
Tim Dillon had a really funny take on the Patreon episode where he played this clip where he's like, this is the best take I've heard on all of the Ukraine-Russia thing. And it was two morons talking about Ukraine-Russia, and one of them's like, where is Ukraine? And the other one's like, I have no idea. And one of them's like,
he was playing both characters?
No, it was a clip of an actual podcast.
Oh.
And he's like, I like to listen to these things to like relax sometimes. And the other person's like, wait, Russia's not a continent? And it was that.
Was it serious or was that?
No. They were totally serious. And then he was like, I love listening to this thing because he's like, the future of hot takes is having no take. He's like, I'm telling you, in 10 years, the most popular comedian is just going to have the take of an infant baby. They're just going to sit there and not know anything. He's like, it's been so cool to know everything about everything. The future is knowing nothing about anything. He's like, that's what people want now. Just know nothing. And he had a funny point where he's like, you can go onto CNN and pretend you know something about Ukraine, Russia, or you can just be on your podcast and pretend to know and pretend to know nothing. But like, there's no difference between the guy who's pretending to know something and the guy who's not pretending to know anything. Like, you're getting the same amount of like sort of credible information.
It's just as useful. In other words,
it's just as useful. They're both useless.
He's making the point that it's always been that way.
Right. We're just gonna start.
You could watch Chris Wallace and these guys, and then just spit it back to your friends,
Right.
or you could say, "Let's be honest, we all don't know anything.
We know nothing."
So I'm full disclosure. We know between each other.
Yeah, no,
we know nothing.
I don't know what NATO
but
is.
I can only go by what my faculties allow me to process.
Right.
And I watch these things happen, and you're just like, you get to this point where you take for granted this normalism of, I guess the world is just this stable place since World War II, and things don't kind of happen. And then all of a sudden you're like, why are you doing this, Vladdy?
I know.
Vladdy, stop! Vladdy, that's so mean. But then I started reading a tiny bit, and I mean a very tiny bit, like a few sentences. And I'm like, okay, I got it.
Yeah.
So I started reading about people who seemingly understand what's going on, in that there is always been this cultural or political drive in Russia to restore it to greatness. That Vladimir Putin, I saw some sort of expose on him that I found interesting, because he's this fascinating guy, right? Because he's definitely evil, but like we don't. But
I believe it was Biden maybe who said he looked into his eyes. And
no, that was McCain.
McCain, what'd he say about him?
He's like, I saw it in his eyes and I saw KGB or something like that.
No, I think he said, that man has no soul.
Yeah, I saw it in his
something.
eyes. Well, so he.
Yeah. Very
from what I
dark
understand,
person.
was KGB way back when, and as a young KGB guy, saw the fall of the Soviet Union. So I'm picturing this whole cinematic thing where he's like, it like all gets stripped away from him, this Soviet greatness concept, and he's taken it upon himself over the years politically to restore Russia to its once superpower status. And there is this idea that Russia has been humiliated perpetually over the years by the other world powers, the NATO alliance and things like that, where I think it's about like stationing troops around Russia, and it's been this constant. Right. So to Russian people, they're like, it must. I don't know, because he has a lot of dictatorial power in some ways. So you don't know like how the regular Russian person feels about this.
You really don't.
But somebody forwarded me something from another guy who has this opinion, like, yes, finally doing what needs to be done in terms of taking back what's rightfully Russian.
Yeah.
You guys don't understand. Like, there's a lot of people in Ukraine who support this. They want to be part of Russia.
Right.
But there is this cultural and political desire to restore Russia to its superpower status. And this is what he's always wanted to do.
Do you think that's something Russian pride and greatness is something Putin cares about, or that's a tool he uses to just sort of gather more power for himself?
I mean, I think human beings generally are ideologically motivated.
But he's
in
a
lot of ways.
sociopath, though. He's not a normal human being.
So I don't know if he's a sociopath in that sense.
I think he
Sociopath. I'm not saying not evil.
Do you think he has normal feelings?
I do, actually.
Yeah,
I think a person
so.
who's ideologically motivated and really believes it is much more dangerous than someone who's just like, I just want power and I'll do whatever I can to get it. Like, I do think there is like a deep-seated drive from what I'm seeing. Like, otherwise, I don't know.
Neither of us know anything about
what.
Neither of us know anything about.
We don't know anything about it, but why else? Just about from a Putin, human being, about Putin. I don't know, but like. Everybody's shaped. I think everybody has an ideology, whether they really realize it or not. And for just pure, like, to not give a shit about Russia. I mean, clearly, it seems like he really does care.
I know. It seems that way. The same way, like, Hitler seemed to care about Aryan greatness. I wonder if that's just like a useful tool they use to consolidate power.
Now, the truth is, we like to view Hitler through the monster lens, which makes sense.
Yeah.
That he's just this mindless, soulless monster. But that might not be as useful an understanding of Hitler
Right, that's
today.
True. That's
you know, we are raised with this idea because of obviously for good reason. He's just some soulless monster. He was some like alien that came down and did horrible things. So to call him just a sociopath without attributing his shrewdness and ability to either tap into the anger of Germans.
Yeah.
He must have felt it himself too. I don't know the biography of Putin or Hitler that well. So, but I would imagine that for someone to really take it that far and be that committed, it's not just, I just want to be powerful. I think it's more ideologically motivated. It's just my guess.
Do you know Hitler was a product of incest?
No.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
That's true.
He's a Jamie and Cersei?
I read he was a Jamie and Cersei.
His parents were brother and sister?
I think his uncle and his sister, yeah. I think so.
His uncle and his sister?
No, sorry, his uncle and his mother, I think. Or it was two family members. And so I heard this interesting thing that like he felt like in his blood was impure, so he was obsessed with like the genetic impurity because he felt that way about his own blood. That messed up.
Is that 100% a fact though, or is that?
I heard it on a podcast, but it wasn't a joke. It wasn't a joke.
Interesting. Well, you would think though somebody like Hitler would be like, it's even more pure because my parents were siblings.
Yeah, maybe that's where he got to. Like you have to
purify
like,
blood.
Instead of being like I'm impure, he's like, right.
I'm so Aryan, my parents are siblings.
Right.
Wow. But the point is, it's not as useful, I don't think, and informative and helpful for the future to look at Hitler as just some inhuman person. Yeah. You have to look at him as very much a human person who was driven by something, so that when these things happen again or repeat themselves, you notice it. Yeah. Because I'm thinking about this now, like China has concentration camps. And Russia probably does too in some way. Russia makes people disappear. Mm-hmm. It's a police state in some form. But we're looking at it right now. And Putin is an actor on the world stage right now. In 100 years, you might be like, that monster Putin, how did they let him get away with these things? So I'm trying to like think about, is this what Hitler was, how he as a political figure at the time was perceived? Because he was, the last in memory of advancing on sovereign nations was World War II, when Hitler starts invading all these places. So you start to think politically, what was the vibe then? As before they knew what Hitler had done in the scheme of things, and were able to just write him off as a monster. Mm-hmm. Like, what did it feel like? I would imagine in some way it kind of felt like this, where you're watching a guy who's just got ambitions to expand his power over sovereign nations around him, to restore Russian purity and greatness and whatever. Mm-hmm. And what do you do? How's Uman? What if Uman, by the way, I said this, what if Uman next year is like amazing? Like hotels and it's super elevated. Well, you're all going to be like,
so first of all,
the food was amazing.
There needs to be a 24-hour stream of how this affects Uman, because there's a lot of people interested. The joke going around is Uman Russian Shana.
I know.
Which I think is funny. Yeah. What I've been hearing mostly is like Putin's pretty good at this. So like he'll like best case scenario sort of. I don't know, whatever, best case scenario, like they kind of plow through Ukraine, take it over, and then like they're pretty good at running countries. So like the thought is like Uman will be like better run than it used to be. Right. That's not taking into account any of the like the lost lives and stuff. That's like
that won't be good.
Obviously that's not good, but like but generally like I guess like if the Ukrainians could just not fight and just let them take it over, that would might
like
be
a new landlord, whatever. It's a new landlord who's better at his job. Basically, yeah. Well,
it's tough for me because I go once a year. I've been lucky enough to go for the last couple of years, so I know a lot of Ukrainians. Like I've had a lot of interactions with drivers,
with Igor and
I can't believe Yaroslav and Yaroslav's son, and like the drivers and like kids basically who are the waiters who basically work in Uman, and they're not all pleasant. Like a lot of the interactions are not pleasant. Like the soldiers are not nice,
and all
the soldiers shake you down, and like they're like dirty and like
what about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, no, there's like it's a different sort of anti-Semitism than like you see in America. It's like very.
Is it man's inhumanity to man? No,
it's dark. It's dark and scary.
It's old school pogrom anti-Semitism.
Exactly. Like they look at you like you're something other than human. It's very very strange and scary. So like it's
whereas here they're like, we hate these powerful Jews. They're like, these Jews are weak.
Yeah, I mean, I was at
because it's shtetl Jews. It's like we kick you out, you stupid little Jew. You get out. And here it's like these Jews control everything. It's like I feel like it's a different perception of the Jew in Eastern Europe than it is here.
Yeah.
Where it's like they have these like stereotypical ideas of the schemy, like the old school Nazi-esque.
It's not so much. It's that. It's all. I think a way to sum it up is I was at a bar here once, and I met this couple from Crimea.
Mm-hmm.
And they said something, and we were talking, and I was like, oh yeah, my family's Russian, and they looked at me and they went, oh, you're not Russian, you're Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, ugh,
yeah,
ugh, like
right.
that, like they look at you as like another.
That's happened to me too.
Species among them. Right, it's very fucked up.
Well, because a lot of these other countries, like we take for granted that in America, what it means to be American is not really an ethnic thing or a nationalist thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no national American pride other than the melting pot of America. And a lot of countries, I will say, not just nasty ones, not just ones that are like kind of hostile in a sense, like British, English, what it means to be English. And there's sort of a cultural, I don't know if it's an ethnic thing, but there is a more defined version of that.
Right.
Than the United States has. The United States is very different. It's just immigrants and melting pots and and different groups that sort of form their own subcultures.
Yeah.
Whereas in France, there's French. Are you French? In France, there is a French culture, and you have to sort of there's a call to assimilate in those countries in a different way than there is in the United States.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like Russia's not the only one like that, but I have had interactions where I met some woman, this blonde woman, who was like a cashier or something like that, and she was like Kozak. I'm like, yeah, lady, no. That's not what she thinks. She's like, Kozak, he's Polish. No, because I think she said Polish, because it's Polish or Russian. Yeah. She's like, he's Russian or Polish? Something? Maybe, I don't know what she was. She was trying to say, oh, he's Polish. I'm like,
not like that.
Jewish? Oh, okay. You know, she just was like,
Yeah. I mean, whenever I meet someone Polish, the first thought is, "Where were your grandparents in the war?"
Yeah,
I always think that. It's like
Polish.
I hate it, but I go immediately there. My friend, a good friend of mine, who I did the short film with, I never asked him about. He's Austrian.
Mm-hmm.
Not Jewish. Yes. I never asked him about the war ever.
But didn't you tell me about this guy?
Yeah. I mentioned him on the podcast. But until we finished filming Radzin, this movie about the Holocaust, I never asked him about his family history. But he mentioned he was like, oh yeah, my grandfather's a Nazi. And I was like, he's like, you know that there was a Terrence Malick movie about this little village where a guy refused to sign his oath to Hitler, and like it's a whole movie about he went to prison. He's like, my grandparents were from that gorgeous, beautiful Austrian village. And he's like, yeah, my grandfather fought the Nazis and like
fought for them.
Fought for the Nazis. He's like he was a smart, athletic teenager, so he was a really good soldier. He's like he's like you didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world at that time. He's like he was
fighting for his country.
He was conscripted, so he fought. He's like he lost like a leg or something.
But does that mean he was a Nazi? Because that's a different thing.
So I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean that's
to him.
He might not have said Nazi, but he said like when you go through the family photographs, there's pictures of him with his Nazi medals and everything, and I'm like, holy shit. But he. And
then he looks at you. He goes, you know, he had a point.
He didn't know, and it's not as charged for him. It's just this bit of family history, which is pretty wild.
If he was a native Austrian, this guy, was he from Austria?
He grew up in Austria.
Oh, because I know that there are like native Germans who live with this transgenerational guilt, and there's a lot of like, for German society, there's been this whole healing process.
I don't think it's like that there.
Yeah, I think in Austria they're like, he's still nice here, you know.
Yeah.
But
no, well, I told you they think about it as this thing that happened to Austrians,
right?
This unfortunate thing where they were turned into Nazis by Germans.
I was in this airplane ride thing in Hawaii. It was like this mini kite plane that you take up as like a tourist activity. And this guy was German who was, you know, doing it with me. He's like, okay, Ami, so now we're going to turn this way and that way. And I'm sitting there and up in the sky with this guy, nice guy, Hans, whatever his name was. Hans Gruber. I know. So it's from Die Hard. And we're just flying and he's like, yeah, so see, it's so beautiful in Hawaii. I served in World War II, you know. I was waiting for him to say that. He didn't. But I'm like sitting there like, cool. He's like, yeah, it's quite a war. Really unfortunate ending. You know? But he didn't say that. But he had that charming Nazi accent.
Yeah.
So I get it. No. So anyway, that's World Affairs on Buckle Up and how we cover it.
So we're with this, what I land in, which is kind of weird, and I want to know what you think about this, is I woke up this morning to like this Axios email that says Russia, Putin invades Ukraine. And my first thought is like, chaos. It's going to be a fun day. Like the chaos to me is so much more interesting than just a regular day. And part of that is because it doesn't affect me immediately right now at all. But like even when Trump was elected, I was like, oh, this is going to be good. It's going to be good.
You think the natives in Kiev woke up like, it's going to be a fun day?
No. But even when Trump,
you heartless pig.
No, because we're distanced from it. But from my vantage point, it's like a lot more interesting than nothing happening.
100%.
Is that crazy?
It's not a crazy instinct. I think it probably just in all honesty, just reacts a part of your brain that responds to. I think at a certain point when Trump, it got exhausting. It's like, I can't do this anymore. It's just, there's too much conversation about one topic. So it almost got too centered around everything. Anything in during the Trump era was relayed back to him or in reference to him or as compared to him, any policy, any event, with Trump, everything. And it was just got exhausting. So it did wear you out after a while. But yes, Trump kept it interesting in that sense.
Yeah.
And things have been a little stale for a while in Biden. It's like politics, it hasn't been interesting. But now you're just like, okay, the movie was slow for a while in the beginning of this season, and now we're in like episode 7 of the season, and something happened.
It's the same thing with the
because it's easy to fictionalize all this bullshit. It's not happening to us,
right?
But it is happening.
It's happening.
So that feeling of this is crazy. You just that little curious, like wow, you're lit up again to like figure to like at least the vacuum is made available to you. It's revealed to you what you don't know. And now you like kind of want to know things.
It's also nice to have like a communal, united, monocultural interest in something. Like we're all in this together, at least for today.
This Russian invasion has been so nice for all of us.
Americans.
No, but
well, you know what? It's nice at the beginning when something first happens, we can all agree on what's happening. In like 2 days, there's going to be 2 camps.
100%.
This is happening. This is happening.
It's the same feeling when there's about to be a massive hurricane.
Right.
And everyone's like, okay, slow down everything that we disagree with, that we know it's here. I can feel it in the weather.
Yeah.
And like the city shuts down. It's like a snow day. Yeah. It's just like, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is like a snow day.
Yes, it is.
All of a sudden it's like, everybody stop. And I think part of that is refreshing and interesting. And you're just like, okay, so we can all agree this one thing is happening.
It's happening. That's nice.
Before we all figure out, I have opinions on it. No one can have an opinion on it. It's too new.
Yeah.
And I guess calamities and disasters and all those kinds of things do that. They just level you. And it's also, you get into this mode of like protective survival mode. Okay, wait, are we everybody good? Everybody, like you get into that mode collectively, like the whole world does. All eyes here, that focus that it just pulls everybody into is really nice.
It is.
But it is weird because at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, like, what do you do if a country decides to do this? It's easy to if a country attacks the U.S., you know what you're supposed to do. If you're an American, you know what you support, and if you're the leader of the country, I would hopefully presume you know how to respond and retaliate. But it's way beyond my purview of understanding to know what to do in these scenarios, because there's this whole other game to be played on international politics of deterring adversaries, these frenemy countries that aren't clearly enemies of the United States, but they also are.
Well, that's why I was saying it's
like
more
we buy all this stuff from China, and yet China.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
So like, what's going on here? I don't understand the dynamics that well of how we're supposed to perceive these countries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, where's Hong Kong? But like Hong Kong is in China, but now it almost is. And Taiwan is a free country, but China doesn't recognize it. So then you find out that the NBA has to make apologies to China because of some sort of ownership NBA market to China. It gets all that business conspiratorial stuff.
Yeah.
Where like LeBron James issued an apology or something because he called Taiwan its own country.
Yeah, it's not conspiratorial. It's
the collusion element, but it's unknown. Like you don't know what the ties are. Not conspiratorial is the wrong word, but it's not transparent.
Yeah.
This Hollywood China infiltration to Congress and this woman who's a spy for China who was sleeping with a congressman, and like the NBA and China. Like I don't understand that. I'm saying I don't understand what's going on. But the fact that like you can't criticize China if you're Disney, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And LeBron James has to apologize for saying Taiwan's a country, which it is according to us, but not to them.
Yeah.
Everyone's like Taiwan is next, like China's going to take over Taiwan.
Yeah.
That was not everyone says that. Ben Shapiro said it on a tweet.
Yeah,
So everyone.
Yeah, apparently there's like a Chinese propaganda state TV is saying this is what's going to happen to Taiwan. Like they're showing videos of footage of Ukraine.
What do you do as the shining city on the hill, United States? Mm-hmm. I don't know I'd be interested to hear from experts of historically how to play this.
I've been.
Do you Ronald Reagan it? That's an evil empire and
well, this is where the deep state stuff comes in. I've been reading.
Yeah, where does the deep state?
I've been reading a book called The Devil's Chessboard. Mm-hmm. And it was like a Times bestseller.
Russians are very good at chess.
Oh yeah,
so
we can agree on that. Yeah. It was a Times bestseller. It wasn't like a conspiracy theory book. It was about the formation of the CIA and Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles, mm-hmm. who were the head of the CIA and the Secretary of State, I believe, at the same time. Mm-hmm. And basically, there's an argument to be made that they were like the most influential sort of duo in the history of the United States, sort of charting the course that we're now on. Mm-hmm. But I mean, basically, like they used Russia and communism to sort of advance the interests of their very sort of small group of sort of people who had similar interests, like business wise. I mean, like these are people who collaborated with the Nazis and like banked for the Nazis.
Which people?
The Dulles brothers and these law firms like Harriman Brothers, like Harriman.
The power behind the power.
The power behind the power. Like and they were. I mean, it was really fascinating about how the Nazis lost the war, and
what?
And these two guys were really worried because in that vacuum, Germany was going to be ripe for communism. Mm-hmm. So if they wanted to shape the future of Germany as non-communist, what they needed to employ former Nazis to run things, because who else was going to run things in Germany? Like you're going to get everyone was a Nazi. Mm-hmm. Like anyone who's successful and ambitious and
Germany
smart was a Nazi.
So Germany was split, half communist, half
right. But they were very instrumental in shielding a lot of like Nazis, like who ran concentration camps, like really awful people, getting their money out of Germany and installing them and protecting them to make sure they could then run Germany,
run a new Germany in America's image.
Exactly. But I mean, so when you talk about the deep state, you sort of talk about people like this who they have interests. Like the defense budgets are like an interest. So like, how's America going to respond? It's probably going to involve like spending billions and billions of dollars on weapons in some capacity. But it's not necessarily the best path forward, but that's probably what's going to happen.
I think the problem is when you call it deep state, it makes you sound full of shit a little bit.
It does.
All you're talking about is the state.
Yeah, well,
you're saying there are actors within the state who make things happen.
When they say deep state, it's talking about people in positions of power that are impervious to elections. Mm-hmm. Like the head of the CIA is not, no matter who's president. The CIA is going to be run a certain way.
Right, they run independent of the democracy.
That's what the deep state really means.
Yeah,
and so
that makes sense.
Yeah, and like the corporations and the lobbyists, like it doesn't matter who's in charge. Right. So and I'm sure it's just going to be whatever's in their interest. I'm sure will be the next step America takes.
Oh, because they actually steer the...
They steer, and they have a clear path forward. They know exactly what they want. Like, I don't know...
I don't know, but this is getting too vague to take it seriously.
Why?
Like, they know what they want?
Yeah, like the defense Raytheon knows what it wants. It wants to make a lot of money. They have a plan. Like, I don't know if Biden has a plan. Raytheon has a plan. And so like it's like you saw at the beginning of COVID, like what happened, like they like gave
Biden has a vitamin regimen daily, and that's
right. He wants to get up tomorrow.
I think it's one of those.
Do I sound that crazy?
I'm just to my ears, it does sound very fluffy. When you talk about these because you don't know who you're talking about. You don't.
I don't know specific names, right?
You're just saying, generalizing. There are these the CIA is going to hook it up with Raytheon. So I'm calling bullshit a little because it is.
Fair enough.
I'm sure there's somebody who could speak to this point well. Yeah. It's not us, but it's interesting. The fact that there are these organizations, these proxies.
You sound like me now.
I'm calling. Yeah. Well, you're calling out. It's just tables have turned because this is your area that you like to bullshit about. I like to bullshit about other things, and you make all these assumptions. But the truth is, we don't. Who the movers and shakers are technically, you don't know. But I still think at the end of the day, the president's the commander in chief. The president decides to deploy military action.
Yeah, but he has a team. He doesn't.
Sure, and everyone tries to influence it, but Congress officially declares war and appropriates money for these things. Are there people that are trying to influence and sway? Sure. But in terms of power, you elect these officials. And yeah, there's all sorts of political incentives that are swaying them in one direction or another. But I think at least constitutionally, there are still channels. And
there are checks and balances for sure.
Yeah. And the president has the final say. So no matter how much influence you try to exert, the president's the commander in chief. He has the nuclear football, not some other guy.
Right, but he answers to his party too, and the party is made up of.
I know the term nuclear football as a spitback term.
I like that. I never heard that before.
It's called the nuclear football.
I like that.
Yeah, I think it's a football.
Meaning he can.
I think it's like a real football.
He can choose to throw it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what that means, but it's a good term. It just means he has the final authority to launch a nuclear attack. He's it's a cool thing, right? The president's the commander in chief. Like, that's his main thing. It's so funny. You have all these guys who want to be president. Like, have you ever ran an army? That's like the main job.
Did you watch West Wing?
No.
There was a really cool scene where like the President Bartlet got elected, and he like the first thing happened, and they call him
Martin Sheen.
Yeah, and they call him into the war room, and they're like, whatever, Bosnia is on the border of whatever. What do you want to do? And he's like, I was a professor 2 months ago, like, and so he looks around the room and he's like, I don't know, tell me. And so the all the generals are like, well, this is what I'll do. This is what I would do. And of course they have a very particular opinion because they're military people. Right. And then he looks to like his chief advisor and he's like, I was in Vietnam. This is what I would do as like an ex-soldier. And then he's like, and then he has to make a decision. But like, exactly, what do they know?
Yeah,
they know what their
unless
team
they're
knows.
a general. Some presidents, Eisenhower was a general. I'm sure he knew a little bit more. But even then,
with Obama also, like, I mean, he and
I think a lot of people don't even consider that. Most people look at the president as this popularity contest. How does he make me feel? Yeah. You realize you're choosing the commander in chief of the armed forces.
Right.
Like they have to be able to do that because they project so many other things that are not enumerated to their position. They have powers that are enumerated, and then there are other things that they're really not supposed to do, like pass laws and policy. That's not what the president's supposed to do.
Imagine a room full of extremely accomplished military people telling you, like,
and then somebody comes in from
you, Mr. President, this is what you should do, and imagine saying no to them.
And imagine they're all like they've been in it for years and they've seen real shit, and then this guy comes in who's been campaigning for a year and a half, and he says, "So, I want to do better."
Right.
Shut the fuck up, Barry.
Right.
That's what they're like, oh, God.
Exactly.
I really think America. It's like, you've only read about America.
Right.
I've defended it.
Yeah.
I've killed for it.
I mean, it must take so much resolve to look at those people.
And what about
say,
Trump coming
something
in?
Different.
I wonder if it's eye rolling. What about Trump? Listen, folks. I ran The Apprentice. Okay, that was very intense. Very intense. I had to fire people.
You know nothing about it.
You know nothing about it.
You can't imagine.
Nobody knows. I have so many words, folks. I wonder what that vibe was like.
I mean, I read a little bit about it. I think on one hand they were like we finally have someone who wants to be aggressive.
Yes.
And on the other hand, I think there were I read
they were like,
fights where they were like,
crazy.
he doesn't know the law.
Yeah.
He's like, do this, and they're like, we can't.
Yeah. You've heard that too.
And they look to his like chief of staff and they're like, talk to him. We can't do that.
The thing is with Trump, like everybody else that came is maybe they would roll their eyes. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But we've seen this 1,000 times before. Like this is what the presidents are when they come in. They're good at campaigning and swaying and making people feel good, and then they come in. So then Trump comes in, they're like, is this good or bad? Right. Like, I like it, but
do you remember?
Is he fucking crazy?
In his like first week, they did like a bombing of Syria or something. Do you remember that? They dropped like a huge bomb.
They bombed off a boat or something as a
it's
thing.
Probably really exciting for the military. Probably like,
yes, folks, I'm gonna give you what you want. I'm like candy. I'm candy for you folks. I'm military candy people. I'm a jelly bean. The jelly bean. But anyway, I was just looking at Twitter all last night, just trying to get updates on it.
Were you awake? I woke up to it. Were you awake when it happened?
I was awake. Yeah. I've seen the headlines gradually changing. Prepares for invasion, prepares for this, prepares for that. But it's wild. I mean, it's got to be scary to be Ukrainian. I don't know.
It's weird to have been in Kiev. I've spent time in Kiev. It's weird to imagine it being
it's
like.
It's weird to see these things and it not be Israel, right? It's sort of like, I wonder how much they're getting wrong, or like the coverage of what's really going on. Because I've seen Israel in this exact context get covered so incorrectly.
Yeah,
and I get why everyone has a misconception about Israel, because you're just watching. Oh my God, these bombs going off. Israel as the aggressor, they see it that way. So I don't know. I'm not defending Russia, but I'm just saying we have no idea what's going on.
I saw a picture from Uman, which is like a tiny town in kind of like the north of, I don't even know, of Ukraine. And it was a very familiar image to me of like walking up to the grave of Rabbi Nachman. And so it's the same image, but there's a stack of smoke miles away from like a bomb that was just dropped.
I saw that too.
Pretty
the
crazy.
Hebrew letters and stuff, and then
pretty crazy. Pretty crazy.
And then also I saw this thing about here's what you need to know about Ukraine and Russia. It was like a up to date, so you can bullshit with people. So it was like
if you're doing a podcast, here's what you need to know.
But it was like, here's what you need about the factions in Ukraine. There are Russian separatist groups that have now broken off and been recognized by Russia as two independent states or Russian states. And then they said, now the problem is in Ukraine, a lot of these rebel groups, I'm like, yeah, go rebels, the underdog, are Nazis. Oh, they show them they happen to be Nazis, so they don't want them to rise to power. We don't want them to. I think the prime minister, the prime minister of Ukraine or the head of Ukraine is Jewish.
Zukowski?
Zelensky.
Is he Jewish?
I made up that name too.
I think Zelensky's
He's Jewish.
Right.
Zelensky?
The head of Ukraine?
Yugo Poltitsky.
The Hunter Biden's friend?
I don't know. The head of Ukraine now, I think, is Jewish. I think. But anyway.
Isn't it weird that the whole Hunter Biden Ukraine thing, Ukraine happens to be the centerpiece of world politics now? And that was
what was it again though, that he was like paid off by them as some sort of like he was like consultant?
He was paid off for like access
and then his laptop.
To his father. Yeah.
The way the media has been so soft on Biden is incredible. Like they're just. I feel like it's one of those things like they're not criticizing, but they're not saying much else either. They're just like, oh man. And I'm not even making an endorsement or critique. You just observe like, what a fucking shitty run.
If Trump was president now, everyone would be like, he's gotten like, this would never have happened if there was a different president.
Afghanistan, people hanging off of planes as they're like he's had so many public foreign policy disasters.
Yeah, I mean Trump is different.
In 2 years, not 4.
Yeah, Trump is different, but it's pretty.
Trump said not nice things. Yeah. That's it.
It's interesting
in a sense. What people got so upset about Trump is he said not. The things he said were repugnant. But
well, I wonder how much he shifted the diplomatic order to make something like this possible.
Right. I don't know. What I mean is what the rage around Trump and what people were furious about wasn't about events. It was just about him. It was about his personality.
Yeah.
It wasn't like look at the disasters all over the world. It's like, no, that's what's happening now.
It's interesting to see also like how much you just can't control. Like we thought Trump was so much control that everything was happening was his fault. Like things just happen and like you deal with it. Like this isn't.
Well, so the argument would be, my father has said like Putin could be in France tomorrow if he wanted to be. They have no defense. We protect everybody. People don't realize all these because he reads a lot of this stuff and he's also like very Republican.
He's someone we should have on my podcast.
My father was always telling me, for the folks out there, homie, I saw you on Michael's podcast again. He thinks I'm just a reoccurring guest here. What the fuck? We're in my studio. But anyway, he does follow this stuff and he's a biased Republican to the core. So it'll always fall on that side no matter what.
Yeah.
But he is also more informed than I am. So he's just like, Putin could be in France's backyard in a month if he wanted to be. Mm-hmm. The only thing keeping him back is the United States. Let me just explain something to you. It's the United States and our deterrent military policy of whatever. That's his opinion about it, but I sort of get it.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yuval Noah Harari had an article I read. Did you read that like 2 weeks ago where he said like the future, it was like kind of a clickbait headline, the future of the world hangs on what's happening in Ukraine. He was basically saying like for the first time basically in like human history, in modern human history, we've managed to avoid war for 50 years. And like this
could be a cataclysmic shift in what we're talking, Yuval. What we've seen is we take for granted that in our lifetime we had 50-year peace. But now in Europe, what is happening here is showing you that there could be a fundamental shift in the way that policy affects change at the cross-section of political power.
He was saying
the consolidation, remediation, and cross-pollination of political power. I use a lot of big words and I'm Israeli, but I'm articulate in English, bitch. Take that. I'm Yuval Harari. And that's a clip. Is that what it sounded like?
Well, I read it. I don't know.
Is he Sapien? Is he the guy who wrote Sapiens?
Yeah. He's a really good writer.
Yeah.
We're
now,
saying like
Vladimir Putin is a sapien, a very different kind of sapien.
Have you heard him? That's an amazing Israeli accent.
What
is that? How have you heard him speak?
Yeah, this is how he talks. It's very subtle, and even his R's are not so strong. You know, he does the American R, but it's subtle. And so what if everybody he spoke to referred to as a sapien? And Biden is a sapien, a very sleepy sapien. He's a sleepy sapien, a sapien that likes to sleep. Whereas Vladimir Putin is a strong sapien. He likes to fight. So sapien is. It's like, I get it. You wrote sapien. Shut up. Oh man. But yeah.
Well, he was just saying like are we able to keep this up or not? Obviously we can't.
Yeah. Oh, like sustained long-term peace.
Yeah, like can we change as a race of Homo sapiens or not race? I don't know. But
the real question from a human standpoint is like Vladimir Putin, like you want to ask, like, why? Dude, what's the deal? What do you want? Like, what's the deal?
That's why I think he's a sociopath.
Right. That's a good way to wrap up that little nugget segment. We covered world politics on Buckle Up for the first time, really in depth, and I think people are going to be more informed.
I think so too.
At how uninformed they are. We just reflect that. Oh, what else, Michael, for part 2?
What else?
I was on a bus last night. Yeah, I was on a bus. I'm constantly in my mind comparing East Coast and West Coast all the time.
What time were you on a bus?
I took the 11:20 p.m. from
Port Authority?
Port Authority back to New Jersey.
Port Authority passed.
I think I have a blister on my foot from this. Well, I went in last night. I went to a show and, trying to get reconnect with a little bit of like the East Coast music scene, whatever it is going on, and connecting with some musicians that I know. But there's a part of it where, there's a part of like having to like sort of restart or like just pick it up from, having moved back. It's like I didn't necessarily want to get out and go and do the whole thing, but I kind of felt I had to, and I don't love feeling like I have to. Making yourself get out there. I like being in a position where I was in LA where I didn't feel like I had to necessarily, but whatever. It is what it is. But man, I'm riding the bus back from the city, and I'm constantly comparing East Coast and West Coast, and it's just, that like nighttime, you're watching people. Some people just staring off. There's that vibe that I'm grappling with, which is like, the East Coast grind is rougher than the West Coast grind in just the day-to-day energy. That people, what they have to go through, and the cold and the elements, it's all hitting me in different ways now. And I just was like, okay, well, I think this is my life now too. I'm on the bus here and shaking around, and I'm checking because we're all the way at the mall, past the highway because it has to make this big detour. So some guy whispers to me because I'm like looking around this bus late at night. It's midnight. He goes, "You're on the right bus, man. Don't worry. He does this all the time."
That's great.
And I'm like, "Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it." He saw that I was like, because I knew I was on the right bus, but of course I don't trust myself because I do this stuff all the time.
Sometimes you can't see out of the window at night too, and you have to like,
There's something almost nice about it too, like the darkness of it, the challenge of it. It gives me a little bit of nostalgia. It gives me a little bit of this like warm, comforting, like, listen, like that sort of grind is comforting in the way that I guess it's familiar, but it's also like, oh, I don't know. Do I need this still? Do I need to like do this all? I don't know. It just made me think.
Why didn't you take like an Uber or something?
I mean, an Uber from downtown, from the Village. I wanted to like do it right. Like I wanted to get on the bus and make my way all the way to here, and I did.
Yeah. I hear ya.
Anything?
I haven't taken. I wouldn't go into the city if I had to take a bus. It would have to be real. I mean, that's how I know I'm like I've lost my edge a little bit.
Yeah,
it would have to be really enticing to get me to do that. To take a bus from Port Authority at night.
Yeah, I don't. First of all, I don't like having a car in the city. It's a nightmare. And I kind of like feeling accomplished of like, I can get all the way to wherever I need to be via public transportation, and it's much cheaper. The tolls are like $16 back and forth. It's insane.
Yeah.
You're saying taking an Uber.
Or the jitney from the Route 4 buses that go up.
Yes, but you go to the bridge and then you take that over.
Yeah, you know what? At least like you're on your own schedule a little bit more. I like that more.
All right, you'll coach me. But I'm trying to figure out a way to just access the city more and just do more comedy, go to more music stuff, and just get in it because New Jersey can feel.
Yeah.
You're here.
Yeah, I need to be doing that more. I need to be doing that more.
Anyway, mostly world affairs on this episode,
Yeah.
Michael. We kept it short. We are kind of pressed for time today.
I'm curious what'll have happened by the time this gets released.
Yeah, I know.
This might
We're gonna
feel,
look
like, super-
awful.
Yeah, I know.
We're gonna look so awful.
Like Putin's dead. Ukraine is Russia.
Putin's dead. But anyway, we have to wrap it up early today.
Yeah.
That's episode 19, a single subject for a single podcast about something we know nothing about. And that is the theme of Buckle Up, Baby. We'll see you next week.
Hello, baby.
All right. Niet vreemden je.